What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Melissa McCarthy film, The Happytime Murders. The Happytime Murders is directed by Brian Henson, son of the famous puppeteer Jim Henson, who created The Muppets, stars Melissa McCarthy, Maya Rudolph, and Bill Beretta. The Happytime Murders tells the story of a world in which humans and puppets live side by side, and Phil Phillips is a former police officer who is now a private investigator who was a puppet. And when members of the Happytime Gang, which was this show that starred both puppets and people and was extremely famous at the time when it was on television, begin to be murdered, he feels that he has to try to investigate this because he thinks that someone is hunting down these puppets. Melissa McCarthy plays his ex-partner from when he was a cop, and they're forced to work together to try and figure out who is killing these puppets. However, in this world, puppets are very much viewed as second-class citizens to the people in the world, so there's a lot of sort of racial undertones in the film in that sense. Now, this movie's been getting a lot of flack for a lot of different reasons, and I will get to those reasons in a little bit, but I do want to say, I think that this movie does have a few good aspects to it. And first and foremost, I think the plot of the movie is pretty solid. I think that if you took this plot and you removed the puppets from it and some of the more like weird comedic elements that are placed in there, you would have what would be a pretty solid cop drama. It's got good twists and turns and things that you don't expect to happen, and it feels like an actual story that you would see in a police film, which I think is definitely a plus to the movie. I think that the direction and cinematography in the film is also very fitting for the movie that they are making. They very much capture LA as this very gritty and dirty place to live that exists, and especially when we see the darker sides of the city, I think that it captures it rather well. And I know that that's kind of an odd thing to point out, but it kind of goes along with the puppetry, because this movie has absolutely fantastic puppetry, and I do love the fact that at the end in the credits they showcase all of the like dudes in green screen suits that were working the puppets that were edited out of the film and all of those things, because it makes you respect it even more. The movie has wonderful puppetry, and they do things with puppets, not just like the gross weird things in the movie, but they do a lot of things with puppets in this movie that are super duper impressive. Like, they are things that I never would have ever expected you could do in a film like this with a puppet and make it feel real, you know? And I'm not saying this movie's realistic by any means, but the puppets, their movements and their mannerisms actually sort of mimic humanity in a more real manner than I feel like most puppets normally do. Normally they're played off in a very funny manner, and sure, there are puppets in this movie that are that way, but I think for the most part a lot of them are supposed to feel like actual people because they just exist in this world. And then I have to really give at least one shout out to Bill Beretta for the voice of Phil in this movie. He does a great job. He's very good at capturing sort of that very old school gritty cop detective character that Phil's supposed to be playing, who's always smoking cigarettes and talking about how depressed he is, and I think that he captured that very well. In terms of the human cast, sadly, I feel like a lot of the people in this film kind of phoned it in. The only person who to me really stood out was Maya Rudolph, and I'm not a very big Maya Rudolph fan, but I actually thought she was rather funny in this movie. She's one of the funniest parts of the whole film, honestly. And that kind of segues pretty well into what's wrong with this movie, and that it's a pretty remarkably unfunny movie. Like, this movie has a little over a 90-minute runtime, and me and my friend that saw it together, I think between the two of us, not counting just sort of out-the-nose breath laughs, you know, just like the like, we maybe laughed 5 times in total combined between the two of us at this movie. There just isn't a lot of very original comedy in it. It feels very generic and bland, and it's just there to try to get that like dirty scumbag laugh out of people where it's like, what if we put him in a porno shop? That'd be hilarious because he's a puppet. And that's the bit. That's the whole bit. That's the bit of this movie is, what if it was a puppet? Come on, but what if it was a puppet? That makes it funny now, doesn't it? And that's it. Like, that's all this movie really has to offer, and once you get that first laugh out of the bit of it just being a puppet, it's then for the rest of the movie, it's no longer funny that it's a puppet doing it because, you know, I wouldn't say you're invested in the story being told, but you're at least intrigued by it, and the fact that they're puppets sort of moves to the wayside a little bit, and you kind of, I don't want to say forget that they're puppets, but the fact that they're puppets shouldn't matter as much. All of the characters in the film feel very generic. They're characters that you've seen 100 times over in cop films, and at times, it does feel like that is deliberate, like they chose to make that decision to make this scene feel like a scene you've seen before in a film. But then there's a lot of other times where it feels like it's just lazy writing, where they were like, we gotta make this a cop drama, let's put in these lazy characters that fit, and then we'll get someone who's like kind of famous to play the role, and then they'll just kind of phone it in, and no one will care, and they'll just forget about it, because there's puppets, and that's hilarious. And I think that they just relied way too heavily on making this film a rated R puppet movie, rather than trying to make just a rated R comedy that happened to have puppets in it. Now there's one last thing that I want to talk about before I give my grade for this film, and it's this sort of film theory idea that maybe the puppets are an allegory for the way puppeteers are treated in Hollywood. Puppeteers are treated as just these novelty acts that go on before the main show, because they're not gonna rake in the money, they're not worth anything, they're just kind of there to make everybody laugh a little because it's a puppet. Because the puppets in the film are second-class citizens. They're viewed as beneath the people. And I think that that allegory does work in some senses, and in others it's definitely a stretch. But I think the fact that a film like The Happytime Murders is able to make people have a conversation like that and bring up some sort of theoretical aspect of this film is really interesting. I'm also a big fan of puppets. I think that puppeteering is kind of this art that's gone away in Hollywood. Like, we used to have crank yankers on TV. We had puppeteering on television. And it wasn't just, you know, the Muppets or Sesame Street or something. So I think that this movie does have a little bit more to offer than some people are saying. While I admit it is definitely not very funny and it is full of flaws, I think that it has something there at its core that's worth more than just kind of a dumb puppet movie. I'm gonna give The Happytime Murders a D+. I really don't think that this movie is worth seeing in theaters. I think if you wanted to check it out on like Netflix or something when it gets put on there, it's worth a watch, I think, maybe once. I don't think you'd ever need to watch it more than one time, but I do think that there's something else there than just sort of a dumb, raunchy puppet comedy, and I think for that reason, it's worth checking out. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of The Happytime Murders, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and hope to see you guys later.